Hey guys, welcome to episode 21 of the 1023 Soul Shop Talk podcast. Today we're just going to talk about how we got here, the trucks we've built in the past, the cars, four-wheelers, dirt bikes, whatever. It's Vaughn and I kind of talking about the bringing up to this point. I appreciate you guys listening, and as per the usual, hi Vaughn.
Hi Dusty. Hi
as though we hadn't already said that. So yeah. So do you want to talk about your? I brought this whole podcast theme up because I wanted to talk about your Camaro a little bit. Do you want to talk about that first, or do you want to work up to that?
Talk about a couple things. In my possession are two Camaros. One of them is essentially a show car. It's a 68 first gen, pretty much base, numbers matching. Yeah, Chevrolet Camaro, nothing too special other than, fairly low mileage, numbers matching engine. It's mostly garage kept, and that's pretty much that. It needs a ton of work to get back to where it was at some point. I just don't really have the time or the place, property, to be able to keep up on it. And the same thing sort of goes for, I also have a 1985 third generation Camaro, which I know everybody loves to hate, but really kind of like the body style a lot. It's not great for what it's used for. I mean, the intentions are to be like a quick street car, and it's what it's set up to be. That's what it'll be. But if my intentions are eventually to take it to the track, it's just not really set up completely for that. It's sitting on a trailer at a buddy's place right now because I don't really have a place to put it. Some people that follow me on social media see me kind of get it back together. It's running now. I wanted to do fuel injection setup, so it's got a fuel injection setup. It is a small block 350. It's kind of a beat motor. We picked it up with a supercharger on it. It's an old B&M. Really has no info about it. We think it's a 144. I've never really bothered to get any more info on it and or try and calculate it. So we believe that's what it is. Doesn't particularly matter too much.
Somehow I didn't know that you had two. I don't know how in all of our conversations I've missed that.
Yeah, the 68's a complicated story that I really don't want to talk about here, but I do have a 68, and it's in healthy shape. Let's put it that way.
That's your blue,
garage kept.
or are they both blue?
It's a show car. They're both blue. Yeah, they're very similar in color. The 68's actually like a nice paint job. The 85, my uncle and I did as one of our first like painting anything ever. So we did like the one part. Like the one part sprays, so like you don't really have to clear it. A lot of people do, and we've come up with a lot of like stuff. Eventually, I'm going to paint it again with the information that I know now, knowledge that I know now. But I still need a little bit more of the equipment to do it, and haven't really. It's good enough for now. I'm not too much of an aesthetics guy, and I think people that know me kind of know that. Don't really care as much at how it looks. I mean, I'd like it to look nice if it is nice, but I'm really not going to do a lot of work to get it back to looking nice. I kind of care more about how it runs and can I drive it kind of thing.
My first rig was when I was 13. I bought a 93, I guess. I don't remember exactly now. 92 or 93. Like the OBS, the old body style 7.3 headlight looking ones. The first year of that, I think it was 93. That was my first rig, and I painted that one in the barn. I painted that one red, white, and blue, and we did it with. I think I just bought. I was 13. I didn't have much money, so I bought a sprayer from like Home Depot for the air compressor, and I bought like the primer and paint and everything. It was like I don't even know what brand it is. It's like the quart cans that you can buy at AutoZone. It was like as basic as you could get. Just like some Rust-Oleum. But I mean that I didn't know going into it. I mean I did a ton of research and everything at that point, trying to figure out decide how to paint it. But it was like getting just the primer to look good, which I mean anything looks good in primer, and I had zero clue how much work could go into making paint look good. Did you, when you did that, I mean, was it, I remember, I don't know anything about bodywork, so I'm coming to totally sound like an idiot probably, but
sure.
I'm assuming you probably have to Bondo a lot, but did you have to run
Yes.
there's like a Bondo and then there's filler for like you put over top of Bondo or you put on top of like small areas if you're not going to properly fix them? Did you have a lot of like little dings and stuff you had to fill in?
So yeah, there's okay. So Bondo, to my knowledge, I mean, I have gallons of it somewhere. I believe it's considered body filler, right? I think that's what like the term for it is, right? And I'm sure there's plenty of other like stuff that's more descriptive for like what you may be describing. But anyway, yeah, just the 85 is sort of a combination of two vehicles, and I didn't find that out until I started stripping the paint off of it. It's an 84 and 85. It's a reconstructed title. They sort of put the front end of an 84 on it, I think, but the rest of the body's an 85. So the driver's side door was from a different vehicle, and front fenders, most of like the front radiator support, all that kind of area was, I believe, is an 84. So I didn't really find out until we started stripping the paint off. It turns out there was like 6 different colors on just one part of the car. So we had heard of it. Obviously, I knew it had a reconstructed title. Yeah, it was painted. I could get there were 2 coats of like primer. So there was like the factory primer all the way down at the bottom of the door. There was, I forget what the original color was. There was a red painted on top of that. There was another primer, and there was like this dark kind of orange, almost like a pinkish kind of thing, like almost like a rose gold kind of look like. And then there was the factory blue, and I don't remember the code name for what the color blue is for those years, but it was sort of like the dull, I don't really know how to describe it, like dull blue. And so that was what the interior and the other half of the vehicle was. So, they just painted it all, and I suppose they probably took down the other vehicle, or the other part of the vehicle, to the rest of the metal, and then painted it all one piece. But it honestly wasn't in terrible shape. There's a lot of non-metal parts, right? There's a lot of like the bumpers, the front air dam, the front bumper, all of that's kind of, I really don't know what material. It's not fiberglass, but I don't know what the material is that it's made out of, but it's not metal. So those things kind of take some abuse, especially because of how low those cars sit, and mine's lowered about 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches. So that's when I purchased it. So it's very low. Like it's really annoying to drive low. And at least for those cars, just because they don't have good areas for things like the unibodies don't allow for a lot of room. So like the exhaust, I have a 3-inch exhaust on it, which just doesn't have an exhaust area, right? There's no there's no room in the chassis for the exhaust to be anywhere, so it just sits underneath the car, and that's a problem when you have a big exhaust and a big single exhaust, because it really gets in the way. And then there's also a cross member. There's you have to work around the transmission starter. Like, it's a really tight situation to be in. And so anyway, the exhaust just ends up hanging down a little bit, and so any bump you really hit just kind of whacks it. So I haven't come up with a good method of getting it up there.
Is there not really channels under the body to fit that?
No, literally none. Anybody that owns a 3rd gen knows that. There's the factory ran it, I believe, along the transmission and the trans tunnel area, drive shaft area, and I think they only had, I'm pretty sure it was a single exhaust. I don't remember the size of it, but I'm pretty sure it was 2 inches ish. So it was a very, very tiny exhaust. And they just sort of stuck them under there. And they also, because they sit kind of higher, especially, from where mine is right now, so it wasn't particularly a problem. But, you don't really have
I don't know much about Camaros. Is the 68 and 69 the same body style?
67 through 69 are the same body style. There's a ton of differences. There is the 70 to 72. I think those were the years of they're still all considered 2nd gens, but the 70 to 72s had a slightly different front end and rear end. Those are the ones I like a lot. But the later model 2nd gens, I think, are very ugly. Yeah. My dad was sort of on a mission to collect them all. Obviously never really made it there, so that's where those 2 cars kind of showed up, and I don't know, I kind of have a special thing for the 3rd gens. And the 4th gens are we kind of refer to them as like the catfish style, the very rounded kind of.
That's where really Camaro's not pretty anymore. It's like they were
Yeah,
weird
let's
in the
put it
late
that way.
70s, and then
Yeah,
in
not
the
a fan
80s,
of
they were just
those.
like, what did you do?
Yeah, make it a big box. That's yeah. So the 82 to 89, no, 82 to 92. I know they're kind of all considered F bodies, but the third gen sort of carries from the 82 to 92, and so they also had the 83s had slightly different. 82 to 83 had a different front end. The 84 through 88 had some things slightly differently. I believe the 85 was the last year without a third brake light. They had to put him in somewhere around that time. And they just sort of stuck him in the glass, I think, in like 86. And then I think in 87 they actually changed the hatch a little bit for the third brake light. Don't quote me on the years, but there was like a period where certain things were a little bit different. I want to say the same thing goes with the 4th gens as well. They had some slight differences. Like there's essentially 2 body styles within the 4th gens. So from 92 to 02 or something, I think it carried into the 2000s. I don't remember the exact years for the 4th gen. That's how kind of little I care about them. But they had slightly different body styles within them, and the earlier ones, in my opinion, are kind of like the uglier styles. And I think the same thing goes with the Mustangs as well. So when they moved over, I think they're very similar years. So the Fox bodies had their 4 eyes and 2 eyes. And then when they went to the newer body styles, and I can't remember what the name of that's are, and then they went to the New Edge, and I want to say like 02 or something. I don't know, I think they fall into the same category, in my opinion, of like body styles with like the Camaros. Like they all kind of fill into that category of like looking kind of ugly, but I have friends that really like those styles.
Okay, hang on. Is that a thing? 4 eyes and 2 eyes, is that like a way that people in that scene refer to those Camaros?
Everyone that I know that has them, yeah. I wouldn't say, I guess they're in the scene. I don't really know. Aside from these guys in my area, I don't really know anyone that takes care of or has an appreciation for Fox bodies. So I have 2 friends. I don't remember if he sold it, but I had one that had a earlier model 4-eye, and then I have one that has like 3.
I know that like the later Duramax, not the later, I guess, like the 06 or so, 05, 06, they had 2 models, like the classic and then the cat eye Duramaxes. Right. I was just curious if it was like a enthusiast thing where just like in general Chevys started getting named by eyes. I didn't know if that was a thing or not. So I guess I'm not involved enough in that world.
I mean, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, the Camaros sort of had something similar, but yeah, specifically for those Mustangs, the earlier models had a different front end. I think they sloped a little bit more down in the front. They don't have as like low of a chin spoiler as the most of the 4 eyes do, and they also have tons of different body kits that I'm not really in that kind of scene. I don't really have any intentions of owning a Fox body. I'm not a kind of big fan, but I do appreciate, what everybody else appreciates about them. That, well, they're going to be fast when it weighs nothing, right?
Is that what it is? I mean, it seems like almost every fast Mustang I see is a Fox body. I mean, which I don't know anything about them other than like I just know Fox bodies because like every drag car I see is a Fox body. Is it just they're cheap or light or like,
I think a lot of
them that like.
I think all of that. I mean, they still had essentially small blocks compared to. All of the Camaros had small blocks as well. But to say you had a classic 302 in a car that weighs like, I don't remember all the numbers. So everybody listening, don't get mad at me. I don't remember, but they're stupid light. They're like 2,000 or like 2,100 pounds or something. And then everybody that I know that actually races them, they pull their rear seats out and their passenger seat out in like a couple seconds. Throw some slicks on it and go rip it. It weighs almost nothing. Like they can barely. Their problem is they can barely get traction.
There's just like a lot of room for activities. And it's light. Like that's
most of it. Yeah, I mean they're not. I don't think they're as easy to work on as the 3rd gen Camaros. But I mean, considering how much heavier a 3rd gen Camaro is to just compare, they're not really even a comparison of like a race car. I personally love the handling of pretty much every Camaro compared to Mustangs specifically. I know a lot of people will disagree on the later models, but I think the handling and steering of a Camaro feels so much better and whatnot. But anyway, they're short, they're cheap, right? The parts are really, really easy to get a handle on. Like, I mean, he has so many because he picks them up super cheap, right? A couple $100 here, a couple $100 there. You have almost running and driving car, so he ends up tearing them apart and putting them together, and and it's they're fun to work on, I suppose. So yeah, all of those components are super cheap. I mean, he ends up piecing together, because there's so many different options, right? He can put together like Cobra heads, or there's a bunch of things you can pick up from a bunch of different vehicles. You can pick up the aluminum heads from like the what are they, what's smaller than the Expeditions?
Explorer?
The Explorer. Yeah, the Explorers are like their gas, like offset, like their EPA offset cars. So they end up having a bunch of components that they can take out of them and put in Mustangs for, like the race vehicles, because they made them like they have aluminum blocks, they have aluminum heads kind of thing, so they can tear them all apart. They did that for a really long time. But I suppose, yeah, I mean, the appeal for him specifically is super cheap. He has a ton of them because you can get them. All of the components to build them, stupid cheap. And the car weighs absolutely nothing. And they're absolute rust buckets. I've never seen one that isn't needing floors. And I think kind of Ford really couldn't keep up. Like when you made the point of saying like why do I see a bunch of Fox bodies? I think that has a lot to do with it. You can get your hands on them, I think, a lot easier. But I really think the Mustangs kind of fell short as far as like engine wise in like their later model vehicles compared to like Camaros. So I mean, that's when Chevy came out with the LS, and everyone kind of loves them for those Camaros. Chevy kind of didn't really have the transmission that Ford did either, though. But as far as like the manuals go, you can pick up T5 super cheap because you blow through them so fast. They're kind of everywhere, and the Camaros use them, and the Fox bodies use them. Everybody I know, they drive amazing for a street vehicle, but if you take it to the track once and put slicks on it, you're probably going to blow third gear right out of it. So it's kind of how it is, I guess. So that's what's in mine. I do like it. It's super smooth, but I know I'm going to eventually blow it up and have to put something else in it. So I prefer the manuals for street car, like for my cars, right? I suppose I prefer manual transmissions, but where I live isn't super easy to drive manual transmissions, so it gets kind of frustrating. But
well, and how fast and furious is it not to have an automatic? That's just awful.
Yeah, I mean, it's from like the tuning computer perspective, like it's fun, I suppose, but on the older vehicles, there isn't a lot of control, and two, I think a lot of the older automatics are kind of junk, and I know a lot of builders will disagree, but I think the amount of work it takes to make sense out of one of those transmissions, it's not practical for what you get, so I'd rather just stuff a manual in it 5 times, and anyway. But I suppose this is kind of funny having this discussion because I'm more of a car guy, wasn't really into the truck scene, and you kind of were. So
yeah, I don't.
Kind of, I guess, opposites.
I didn't start with. I guess I started with trucks. I've never had a car that I cared anything about. Like my very first running vehicle that actually got me anywhere was a 98 Ford Contour that I got for free because it didn't have. This is where we'll find out that I'm not a mechanic. It had like there was a fusible link between the alternator and the batteries that had fried.
Satan invented those.
What's that?
Just saying. Satan
whatever the heck it's called, I don't even know what it's called.
No, fusible.
Is that what it's called? Awful. I guess that's just a good guess. I don't know.
Shouldn't exist. It's a
thing that can explode. It's a fuse. Yeah. So,
right.
Anyway,
it's
that
designed to fail.
And it was from a guy. It was actually kind of cool. So, I don't know. Backstep. We had a really good family friend. She was really poor. She went through the Holocaust. Amazing woman, but she never had like any money, and she was always she hoarded a lot of stuff. Probably because like she went through some awful things and just like she had a hard time breaking out of that. But amazing stories, an incredibly strong woman, and she was very caring. And her neighbor had this Contour that was like, it was full of trash. It was like literally full, like bags of garbage filling the whole cabin of this thing. And at that point I needed a car because I'll get into this in a second, but I wrecked my first Ranger that I painted and all that stuff. He was like, I don't want this car, like, for the, the best of him, I'm paying it forward. You can have the car if you can get it out of here and make it run. And that's all it was. It was honestly lucky at that point. I was 13 then, 14 actually. I just got my permit, and that was what it was. I just bolted whatever. I think I just bolted the cables together, and from that fusible link, got it running, no problems. It was great. That was my first car. And I mean, I drove it like it was a Camaro, but it didn't go anywhere very fast, and I don't, so I got a 20, so it was 2013, 2012-ish, 13, I got a Focus, a Ford Focus, it was like their sport model or ST, I don't even know what they're called, but it was like, it had, the nice, like, you had like 16-inch wheels, and like it was all blacked out and everything, super sexy. I got that right out of high school.
Well, we went through a lot of those.
Oh, they're cheap, and they look
so
okay.
My dad liked to buy them and flip them. So yeah,
they're not powerful. Yeah, I bought in 2014. I bought a. This would have been a couple years out of high school, I guess. I bought a 2012 Volkswagen Jetta with a 2.5 liter. That thing, I don't know if they are nice or not, but I sure enjoy driving it. It was a super torquey little motor. Like, that thing was a lot of fun to drive. And I think that the Contour, the Focus, and the, what is it called? Oh, the Jetta were the only cars I ever had. Up until now, I've got a Ford Fusion now. I got a 2006 Ford Fusion. That's our backup vehicle. But I never had a nice car. I really, 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 really want to build a 69 Camaro really bad.
Wow,
I know
like
I'm
else.
just as not knowing anything as you could be, and I just want one. I don't know why. I've always wanted one. It's one of those things, like, as a kid, you just kind of commit to wanting one, and then you're just like, I want to do that someday, or I'm going to do that someday, and you don't really have a good reason for it. You just want to. I worked for a guy, probably senior year of high school, that he had a 69, a black 69 Camaro that was just sitting on his property. Had tons and tons of cars. He had a 77 Ford, like a single cab long bed, high body, that was super nice too. Tons and tons of cars on his property, and I just like cleared brush and stuff for him. And I wanted both of those. I was like, I'll work all summer for that truck or that car. Either one, doesn't matter. Just, I want one of them. But he just wouldn't get rid of them.
I can respect people's appreciation for the 69s. Any of the classic Camaros, I suppose. It's funny, I have these discussions plenty of times with some of, my friends about vehicles, and we talk about this. If I had to choose, I still always end up going back right to a 68. I suppose I'm biased, but there's certain things I like about the 67s and the 69s, but all of them together, I sort of like how the 68s turned out a lot. Sort of like the missing features that it has from the 67s, but also not having some of the stuff I don't like from the 69s. If the 69 didn't have a flat rear body line, it wouldn't be that different, right? Aside from the rear, and some of the extra options that the 69s have. It would basically just be a 68, I suppose. So there's that, right? But that's the thing that does it for me in 69s. I don't like the rear fender, the body line. So I like the rounded body lines that the 67s and 68s follow.
Yeah,
a lot.
Someday I want to build one, I guess, if I have time, or maybe I won't. But I think that they're cool. I guess part of my inspiration for wanting to talk about this was because you have had, and you do have, a couple of cars that are just kind of cool. And I recently went back and I watched all of the Fast and Furious series, which is just like, I just want to point out, that is like the most unrealistic, horrible, series of movies. if you actually want to be practical in any way, shape, or form. It's so stupid.
Well, that's, I guess, where you land, right? Of like people that like it. I think like I'm happy that I have friends that appreciate just knowing that a movie about cars, right? And that's cool, right? But aside from that, right, I think there's a fine line of I can't stomach it, like I can't watch it because this is frustrating me how awful like things line up. It's like, okay, he doesn't have 15 gears, or it's you can't make that much horsepower with nitrous, or that's not how any of that stuff works, right?
And also, I don't know if it's
no surprise.
Maybe it's
nobody
true, but I
listening
feel
to
like
this.
it didn't matter what many times I go to the track, I've never seen blue flames come out of your exhaust because you're just sprayed 10 gallons of nitrous. Also, you can't do a burnout for 5 minutes and then just like all of a sudden go like, hey, I'm going to do a wheelie now because that made my tire sticky. Like, I'm pretty sure that made your tires non-existent. Yeah. It just, I don't know. It doesn't matter. That whole thing, I tried to watch it because I feel like it's the closest thing to something that could be inspiring to keep in this industry and love it. But, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's a lot of fun. Like, I like getting the car back on the road, like, every time I take it out, right? And also, like, the amount of work that's gone into it, right? Like, aside from, I mean, I got it as a rolling chassis, right? So from there, it was completely engine work, and then I blew the engine up, no surprise with a supercharger. I had to tear the top end back out. It didn't hurt the bottom end. I just blew head gaskets, or so I hope anyway. So, had to tear that all down, and those things get hot real fast, so I need a big old radiator in it, and, by the way, if anyone doesn't know, B&M, 144s, that any of the 1 or 2 series, like, pretty much all of those blowers are, roots type, so they dump heat straight into your intake. They're awful. They're super fun to drive, right? Like, make a couple pounds of boost at like 1800 RPM, 2000 RPM. They're fun, but they're very likely to do a lot of damage, and they're also not very efficient, and they're very hot. Plenty of people make like chillers and coolers and everything for them, but I mean, for the cost of the blower, I'd be way more into it for that. I'd rather just put any other engine in it. I mean, it's other than the novelty, and it's fun, and everything's too tall for the car, right? So as far as engine wise goes, right? So it's a small block 350, and it's got kind of one of the smallest, roots type blowers you can put on it, right? There's, I think, one size smaller than it, and it's, I have a throttle body kit on it now, but it did have a carburetor. And I had a fairly low profile air cleaner, and it's a 2.5-inch cowl induction hood, and we still had to cut a hole through the hood to fit the air cleaner out. And so that's always fun, because when you go to car meets, people know me as the kid who has, the air cleaner through his hood, right? Years ago when I used to go to meets and whatnot. But that's how I ended up meeting a good amount of, the car guys that I've been friends with for a while. Specifically, some of the few that I just brought up was, oh, you're that guy that's got the Camaro at the end of the street with the hole in the hood.
That's me.
Yes, that's me. So it's really funny, just the way it's set up. I mean, it's difficult because now I can't really drive it in the rain. It's got to be pretty much garage kept or tarped or whatever to keep the intake dry. And it's a horrible pain because not only does the intake get wet, but also it leaks down into the to the valley, and then it fills up, and then it leaks, behind the valve cover gaskets and gets into the oil, and ask me how I figured that one out. But that was a pain in the butt. But anyway, it ended up getting mostly back together. It had to do pretty much entire electrical wiring harnesses, which is kind of my favorite part. I do kind of really enjoy making electrical looms and that kind of stuff. So I got to build a nice electrical harness for that, get rid of most of the junk that was in there, and I had to run an electric fuel system that I need to be more comfortable with, just because the way I have it set up, it kind of had to run near exhaust, which doesn't make me feel good, gasoline kind of thing. So that's got to get sort of done. The body got kind of beat up over the past few years. It's kind of sad because it was in pretty good shape, but ended up having some accidents that were involved from mostly my stupidity, but literally had nothing to do with me actually driving the vehicle. So it ended up being like bumped into this or walked into that, or I backed it up off the trailer or something, or the block came loose or something and doink here and there. And so it's kind of sad how things ended up breaking or getting scratched up or something, or people just being kind of idiots. There's a nice big fat key mark down the side, which had nothing to do. It's a late key mark, but it's still like somebody just had it hanging out of their bag and they walk right by, and I kind of wanted to cry. And so it's not great, but I eventually I'll get around to fixing it. But I kind of care about it running and driving because that brings me more joy than
like one of my vehicles. So. I bought and sold more cars between like 13 and 18 than I did since. But like one of them was an old IDI. It was a not a brick nose, whatever was in between the brick nose. It was like a 89 or 90, whatever that's called.
What was it?
I don't even know if there's
I think they followed similar years.
Old body style. I don't know.
Well, I think they followed the same years as the cars, right? Like 82 to 88, and then from like 88 to 92 or something like that. It
was pre the OBS body style. Like the body was all the same, but like the front end was different. That's
which
and
was
the interior. But like the bed and everything had the same.
I think for the Super Duty style trucks, that was what I think it was 94. For
94 is when they switched.
The diesel style. Was
pre 94. I think it was an 89 or 90. But I had an old IDI, non-turbo, didn't have the ATS turbo or anything on it, and it was a manual, single cab, black, long bed, so clean. Like somebody had taken care of this thing. It had 89,000 miles on it. It was not 89 because it rolled over. Like it actually was 89, as far as I could tell. But it was so nice. All 105 horsepower it put to the ground. This thing was wicked. But I love driving it. Like there's something like a thin steering wheel and like everything about the experience was nice, and I just enjoyed it. Like I didn't really care that it wasn't fast. It just fun to drive, and I feel like that probably applies somewhat.
Only on 7.3s,
Never
right?
had a cool car, but I feel like it probably applies to cool cars too. Just like you just enjoy driving something older. Like I don't know what that is, but it sure is enjoyable.
I think there's definitely something fun. Obviously, the whole like I put it together kind of thing. But yeah, I definitely really enjoy driving older vehicles. I mean, the 68's kind of rough because it has completely mechanical brakes. It does have 4-wheel disc. I'm pretty sure. If not, it's definitely front-wheel disc. But mechanical brakes are not as fun as it sounds. It does have power steering, which is... Actually, I don't know of any of those years that didn't have power steering, but I'm sure it was kind of an option. I have a feeling it was an option. I'd have to ask my buddy on that, but... what else? Yeah, mechanical brakes are awful, especially when you have drums, and I heard that they had 4-wheel drums on those with completely mechanical brakes, and that just sounds horrific. Steerings, I have never driven one that had, I suppose, healthy steering. I don't know what to say, but the steering, I don't know how much better it can actually get from what I have and what I've driven, but it's not super, I wouldn't want to drive it regularly, let's put it that way, but the 85, I'm very happy with how that thing handles and drives pretty much everywhere. If the intentions at some point years ago were for me to be able to drive that every single day, right? When I intended on building it originally, it was supposed to be a daily driver. Never really made it that way, and it was kind of impractical the way we ended up setting up as far as, if you wanted to be able to daily drive it, it needed a lot of money, which we didn't have. So, the idea was not drive it daily and make it into a, streetable, car that could take to the track if I wanted to. So, the intentions were to keep it road legal, and, I like taking things, or I like going to the track and all, but I prefer to drive my car more, especially when it's fun, and believe it or not, I do like to go fast, and I prefer to do it in a more practical vehicle. It's kind of hard to justify making, 500, 600, 700 horsepower, whatever it is that you need to make a 8,000 pound vehicle fast, when you really only need 300, 400, 500 horsepower, or less, honestly, to make a car that weighs 2,400 pounds or something fast.
Dude, a couple years ago, Robert and I went to
Las Vegas I should say fun
for a it was a business conference thing, typical Las Vegas stuff. And when we got there, I was like, I get so jet lagged, really bad, but I got super jet lagged. And that same day we landed, 3 or 4 hours later, we were like, well, I don't know what to do. The conference starts tomorrow. Let's go. They've got those, rent a a race car, rent a like an R8 or a Lamborghini or a Ferrari or whatever. You just like you can rent one of them. And,
right.
I yeah, you rent a
supercar.
supercar. Thank you. You rent a supercar.
Class.
And so the first car, like I've always wanted an Audi R8. I don't know why. I love them. That is my second favorite car. And I was so disappointed, man. Like I hop in that thing and I drive it and I'm like, this is not what I was expecting at all. Like it was fun. Like it was fun
Really?
just because it was exhilarating because we were, it was a course. So you got to like, you could hear the tires squealing around corners. You go as fast as you can around corners, everything like that stuff was kind of fun. But it wasn't like, awe-inspiringly powerful at all. And I told the guy, I was like, because this was been like 2 years ago. This is when I first had built the 6.4, which like the 950-ish whatever horsepower 6.4.
Right, spin off 4 tires 6.4.
Like every weekend I was out there or on the way home or whatever. I was out there, doing stupid stuff, doing burnouts, whatever.
In a close
course, of course, but playing around with that thing, and and I was like, man, I've got a 2008 truck that's faster than this thing. I'm like, I'm not impressed. And the guy just laughed about it. He's like, no, you don't. I was like, okay, well, I'll show you videos. And I showed him videos of it, like, 0 to 60 in like,
Did you really?
3.2 seconds or 3 seconds or whatever. And he's like, holy shit.
Well, I don't really think it's fair to like, I mean, of course you can launch them, I think, a lot easier than most vehicles, but still I'm not sure it's super fair to compare an 8,000 pound vehicle like.
Well, it doesn't matter, but the point was I wasn't like, this whole experience isn't what I thought it was going to be. It was cool to get to drive an R8 because I always wanted to, but it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And then the coolest thing about that experience, though, they had a pre-runner truck, so you can go like jump them, and that is a crazy experience. I mean, they weren't fast, whatever. They were like 290 horsepower. Whatever. I don't know what they had in them, but they're modeled after like F-150s. Somebody would know more about this than me, but that was the coolest crap. Like coming up to a jump and just like, full throttle out of a corner. And they feel like a boat. It's so weird. Like you feel like you're going to flip over going on.
Because the suspensions are all loose.
Oh yeah,
and
they've got like a foot of
loose.
suspension travel. Like it's the craziest stuff. The dude's like, yeah, the biggest thing you got to worry about, like if you're going to hit this corner hard, you got a foot to the floor through this corner. And that it doesn't feel right because you're just like leaning so far out of it unless you get it right. And I mean, like launching that thing and being weightless for what? Probably like 10 seconds, 8 or 10 seconds. Like it's a long time when you're just up in the air and then you can't even like see the ground below you. Like I would have traded the Ferrari, the Lamborghini, the Porsche, the R8, all that stuff we drove. I would have traded any of those for more time in the pre-runner. It was so much fun. It was such a blast.
Yeah. A lot of that's kind of fun to think about, of like, the underwhelmingness that you had from stepping into the vehicle. And I had completely forgot that you had built a 6.4 around that time. And so I can understand why and that was like basically right when you got it. Like,
yeah, I had just spent the last 2 months driving that truck. That actually like it didn't handle well. Like, I mean, it didn't, but like it sure was just like if you just want to do burnouts and
well, you got the death trap effect, right?
Well, not as much of a death trap effect as OBS. That thing was terrifying to drive, which made it so much fun.
Yeah, you have the baseline of blood pressure.
Yeah, that was when you guys came up. I guess it would have been when we moved into the last shop, 2018 or whatever. Yep. I just put that OBS together. That thing, like it wasn't that fast. It probably wasn't more than like, I don't know.
Well, you were just timing just over 500.
Yeah, somewhere around 500 horsepower, but it was like a terrifying 500 horsepower. It didn't handle at all. It had like major hop, like it was just a clapped out 450,000-mile truck, and just beating the crap out of it. Like it was just a beat up truck, and for what it was, like that thing was pretty terrifying to drive, and that was pretty fun.
I think my favorite part about that truck is I've never actually sitting in a truck, like a pickup truck, and sitting in a parking lot or something and actually felt, well, I really just want to do some donuts.
I think the
right
donuts
now.
pretty
Like,
good.
I've never wanted to do that. Yeah, in a truck until I sat in that truck and I went to a wet parking lot and I was like,
he's like, I
man,
can't
I
help
really
myself.
want
I
to do
just
some
want
donuts
to do
here.
this. You don't have to tell me if you did. You probably told me you didn't, but if you did, it was probably pretty fun.
Yeah, I actually didn't, but yeah. No, I really wish I did, but I was kind of afraid considering all of the things that it just put springs in it or like rear shackles and whatnot, and the suspension was making all kinds of noise at the time.
But you don't
so
trust
I had
me
no
as a
desire
mechanic?
to break it.
It's
I just didn't want to be responsible for fixing it.
It would have been a good choice anyway if you hadn't. So, yeah, yeah. That thing. I had a S476, a fuel system. I think I had adrenaline pump in it, and what did it have then? 250-100s, maybe 3.2s. I don't remember now.
You had the 250-100s, I think, even before you put the turbo on it, I thought.
That's right.
You had
when I bought
250-100s
that,
in
the
it
night
when
I
was
bought
up there
that,
with an adrenaline.
I brought it to the shop, and I had a set of 250-100s sitting there, so I just threw them in, and it worked. It didn't do anything because there was no fuel or anything for it. But I drove that through the rest of the winter, just bone stock, almost a 500,000-mile truck with 250-100s, and then I did a fuel system S476, and I guess maybe it had a KC like 66.
You have the KC 69,
yeah, whatever. I don't remember what it was, but yeah, something like that. But that was a lot of fun to drive. It was awful. I hood stacked it. Another terrible experience. It was just awful. Like I couldn't turn the heat on. Like we're in Alaska, so it's not like mornings are warm, especially getting into the fall. And like I couldn't turn the heat on. If I ever turned air on at all, it just sucked all of the exhaust into the cab. So I'd have to like drive with the windows down, even when it was like 40 degrees outside. Otherwise, I would like suffocate.
I have to say, I just brought back the funniest memory. If I'm not mistaken, Justin was the one that cut most of the hood out, right? It was that truck, or was he working on another truck?
I don't think he cut my hood out. I did that.
Okay. I just remember him going through so many hole saws and like the amount of time he spent cutting a hole in whatever hood he was working on at the time.
He had a 12 valve.
It took him a whole day.
He had the most like...
Oh, I remember that truck. Was that the one he was putting that stack in?
He had the most clapped out 12 valve I've ever seen. He's like, yeah, he bought a 13 mil pump from somebody on eBay or something. I don't even know what it was. It was actually a nice pump, but he got it for super cheap. And then he had another buddy, somebody he met on Instagram or something, that was selling a 126 mil huge charger. I don't even know what it was from. Just massive.
Right, it was compounded.
That he just like welded up some piping and like stuck it in front of an S476 and was like, I'm gonna make some power with this thing. And it didn't make power because like he couldn't. It didn't.
Didn't have
the
a
trans
transmission.
was just. It was no. It wasn't gonna do it. And it was just like, I don't know. It was always awful. The timing gear was always like, shifting. He didn't get it tightened down. Whatever. It just like everything about that truck was garbage.
And
but,
then head gaskets, all kinds of stuff.
But I have never seen.
I just remember him going through hole saws like
shoot is
crazy.
High is that thing. Like maybe it didn't have air, it didn't make any power on a dyno, but it definitely threw a cloud up, 40 feet in the air. I was like, holy crap. And it sounded good. So I guess that's what matters. Just Instagram the sound instead of the going fast
wicked.
part.
that was one of those times where like it was on the dyno and it was just like I have to cover my ears kind of thing because there's no way this thing's staying
cover our
together
ears
kind of
and we all
I just-
we just backed up. Like, this does not sound healthy.
Yeah, the whole area backed up. Yeah, that was.
It's a fun experience, and what's weird about that is like, you know, now, like, especially like I've been through like growing up, all the stuff we went through, and then getting into like that stuff, like beginning in the diesel scene and everything. It's fun, and then like now I have no interest in it. It's
So you don't have any interest in it because we definitely. I mean, we're having fun talking about this now.
I just don't want to play that
right?
game.
And, like,
I guess
I don't
is
know.
what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
I want to build trucks that are useful. And so like it's fun to look back on that stuff, but it kind of feels like when you're a teenager, you do silly things and it's cool, and you can appreciate those memories. But like I wouldn't want to do it again. That's what I feel like.
I don't mind helping other people do that. Maybe I'm an enabler, but I mean that's what we do all day. Kind of is help people. Kind of. I mean, well, I guess that's where we kind of are different, and that's not this type of podcast, but you know, as far as talking to people about like what they want to do with their builds. But I mean, we'll definitely don't turn people down that are actually interested and are willing to put the effort in to make a stupid setup. You know, we have plenty of people that it's like they did exactly what we did, you know, or specifically you guys did, like, you know, 350 200s and a stock block and an S475, and you know, well, I do not recommend that at all.
Idea.
You probably
if you
blow
want to play,
it up, but
go for it. It'll be fun for a while.
And I mean that 6.4 is kind of wild. So like that's surely fun, but you know, we're both on the same page as far as like I know there's a reason why my truck's the way it's at right now, and I don't really have any intentions of going any bigger. Just kind of more work than I want to put in. Like, you literally offered to send me a set of bigger injectors, and I just don't feel like doing it. That's just because it needs other things, and injectors are kind of the last thing it needs.
Like,
right
what is
now.
more power going to do for me?
And
like, just
for me, and how that truck is set up, it's not really going to get used all that much. I definitely, you know, try to have my fun with it, but it's not what it's there for. You know, I would much rather have more fun in a car that's significantly more like useful in that scenario and built for that. You know, if I can get my Camaro when I get my Camaro back on the road, kind of thing, right? So,
I don't know. I'd rather just everyone drive a 2-liter turboed Equinox because they're pretty dope. It's
still won't get me to agree with you on that.
That thing. Okay, you
don't
mentioned
like those
before,
cars.
you know, throttle response and everything. Like, I the first time I hopped in that thing, I was like, man, this thing is responsive. Like, for a 2-liter, like a mid-size or small, you know, whatever SUV. I don't know what's considered, but like Kayla's new Equinox is like it's fun to drive. Like, it's not like you're not gonna win any races, and that's where I was super disappointed. I guess it's just the way everything's set up now. People want just like nobody wants to go over 20% pedal to drive their car anymore, and so you just you
well, we
get
talked
in and
about
drive the
this
thing, and it's
of,
just
like,
snappy everywhere. And it's like, man, that's responsive. And then you like go full throttle, and it's like anything past like 50% pedal, nothing happens. You're like, man, that's fun to drive, and then you're expecting like a punch when you let into it, and just like, what happened? Where did the power go? There's nothing there.
And there's a very, very fine like area, right? So like occasionally I drive a little Nissan, I forget what it is. It's a newer like Sentra or something like that. And that is it's difficult to drive for me because I like a very linear pedal. And so it's difficult to drive when you want to like keep up with traffic that isn't where I live kind of has some traffic that people don't know how to drive kind of thing. So like you're speeding up and slowing down, and it's really difficult because it wants to accelerate very fast, and so you have to pull off the throttle. And as soon as you pull off the throttle, you lose everything, and you step back into the throttle, it takes off again, and you're like, none of that's what I wanted. I wanted a nice smooth. I wanted to be able to match my speed and be able to use the pedal. And so it's frustrating. And then you also go, well, I want to pass this guy, and you go from like, 10 or 15% or wherever you're at, and you go to 40%, and there really isn't a whole lot of change. You're like, did I really need to go from like 15% to 80% or wide open?
Yeah,
to
and
pass
like
this
nothing
person?
changes. But
when I was able to get up to speed at 10%.
Like, it brings us higher up in the RPMs, and so we can
Exactly.
make more power, and that's it. Like, it's not because it's actually like making a lot more power.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously it is, but yeah, that's how it feels, right? It's like you just did a ton of work in that low pedal area, which frustrated. I mean, it took it right out of a Volkswagen book, right? Like straight out of every older Volkswagen that I've actually like had the ability to tune has been exactly that, because they're drive-by-wire, right? So they have a enormous amount of throttle control. So one of the first things I ever did, in any Volkswagen setup that I tuned, was immediately get rid of all the delay in the throttle plate control system, and they have so much delay. Like, it's well beyond like a dashpot range. Like, there's a ton of delay, and they have this super strange pedal, and I understand they kind of wanted to use it for a little bit more like engine control instead of just, you know, I don't know if I just want to say like power control. So like that, I understand why their engineers had their reasons for building that throttle setup, but I think a lot of it had to do with complete, like, just playing with people's brains on how to drive, and obviously Volkswagen's no stranger to that. But
yeah, it just it feels wrong. It feels good when you're not thinking about it, but it took me about a day to be like, wait a minute, I was fooled here on how much power this thing had.
Yeah. Yeah, well, exactly. You step into it and you're like, wow, this is nice. Like, I can drive this every day. Or like, wow, you feel like there's so much more pedal there. You feel like it has a good amount of power, especially like some of the smaller turboed engines. Their turbos just, I mean, they're puny, right? But a 2 liter doesn't really take a whole lot of air. But I just have to kind of picture that maybe they did size it, like our previous podcast that I was on, where we talked about turbo sizes for horsepower ranges, that they kind of sized them, you know, if I want to say like too small to fit those ranges, like super low RPM, super low air range for gasoline engines, right? Super low throttle, and try and get as much response in that range as possible. And they kind of just level off at the top. And, you know,
it's disappointing. It's a little disappointing.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. I mean, we're not here to talk about modern 2 liters.
Other than the fact that besides all that, I still like that Equinox, and I think that every family guy should own one. Like, buy that before a minivan. If you don't need a minivan, just buy that before a minivan. That's all I'm saying.
I would buy literally anything. Well, I think most of our customers buy Excursions, which honestly, everybody knows my distaste for Excursions. Well, if you don't now, you do. So I don't really know what to say.
I would have bought an Excursion for her, except she doesn't like driving big things. So, and I honestly never would have even considered looking at something that's small. But there is a place for Excursions for sure. I can admit that. I just have to deal with the fact internally that I have a small minivan.
Well, I think a lot of people buy Excursions. Well, I think that's it. Like, I think a lot of people buy Excursions for that. Of like, well, I'm not going to accept that we're going to drive a minivan, so we're going to drive the biggest, heaviest thing known to man. That's instead of like set up 25. Completely awful. Yeah. Yeah, and they have horrible shift points and super soft transmissions. By the way, everybody that owns an Excursion is set up actually differently than pickup trucks. So you intentionally have more transmission wear than any other pickups. It's not much, right? They still make it plenty of mileage, but just so you're aware, and they also weigh a lot more, so it's not a combination for, you know, and so I think a lot of our customers should be aware of that when they, you know, they question why all of a sudden their transmission starts shifting a lot harder, or their torque converter just really isn't existent most of the time. And so anyway, I think people just end up buying them to
not as bad as
be in that range of like, I'm not accepting that it's a
minivan. Like if you drive a van, you hop in like a early 2000s or late 90s van at 7.3, you literally cannot feel the shifts. Like, you can hear the RPMs change, you can't feel a shift, you never feel lockup. Doesn't happen. So it's not quite that bad, but it's almost that bad in Excursion.
Well, yeah, and the vans, they shift them super early, and because of typically like their weight ratio, they kind of end up being, and their tire size and the gear ratios they set them up with, they end up immediately getting into overdrive at, say, 30 miles per hour or like 28 miles per hour, and so there's no room for lockup. And of course, all the shifts are super soft, and it's just set up so much differently, so it's kind of difficult to work around like the struggles of a van. So, you know, anybody that has worked with us in vans knows that when I talk to them about like their limitations, like we have pretty strict limitations on what you can do with a van, and so like I have no intentions of owning a van. I'd rather just do everything I can with a pickup and deal with what I had to do.
Come live in Alaska,
and I don't like Excursions.
Stick more seats in the back of it and put a canopy on it and call it an Excursion. But
I don't want an excursion. That's the whole point.
We got to cut this thing off. We're coming up on an hour. I appreciate you guys listening. If you have input about this podcast or anything you want to talk about, if you want to join the podcast, talk about your builds or ask questions, you can find the links for our website, 1023s.com, in the description to buy parts. You can find the links for joining the podcast in the description. And you can send us an email at dusty@1023s.com or media@1023diesel.com. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening.